one practice or 30, right? Is what I tell people, right? Grow your one practice really big because you're the special sauce, right? Create the lifestyle you want, create the profitability you want. Like do that, or do like a franchise or large growth model, right? But don't do the in between. You're just kind of dinking around, right?
All right, Alex. So I'm pretty excited today because we finally got one of our, I don't know, I feel like he's been our friend for a while now. For the first half of our friendship, I'd say, right? It was mostly just all online.
Okay.
And then we've gotten to meet at like different events and stuff like that. But for both of us, he's been a pretty big like mentor to us. A lot of it probably like indirectly, not even him really realizing it. But basically, he was kind of in our group that we always reference, that we had that Facebook group, right? Yeah. Where all of us kind of like shared everything in our whole startup journeys. He was one of like the OGs of it, right? There were a few of these guys, and he's based in Spokane, and he absolutely like crushed it. And so a lot of us looked at him as kind of like, all right, how do we end up becoming like him, right?
I know. He's seriously like one of the smartest people that we ever talked to.
No, so a little bit of background, because I know we're like giving this big speech beforehand, right? But like, but Josh basically, or should we say Dr. Cochran, right? That's how we have to say it. But he had started his startup journey a few years before us, and he grew it into several locations. I'll let him go through and tell us how many he's
a big
got
deal
right now. But all based in Spokane. It's under like the name like Dr. C Dental Partners, right? And so he basically went from one startup to another one, then built a building from scratch, put a practice in there, started acquiring practices, like just absolutely crushed it. And then our story and journey still kind of connects a little bit because you and I and Josh both ended up selling to the same DSO within a few months of each other.
Yep.
So like we kind of figured out a way to get even more connected to each other, I guess. But I mean, yeah, absolutely, he's crushed it. I mean, like I said, multiple locations, tons of good reviews on Google, right? Like I think he's got over like 1,400 reviews at one of his locations, which is nuts.
And doesn't even practice anymore.
No, and doesn't practice. Probably, I don't know. It's been a while, I think. But yeah, I mean, if you could sum up his whole like group, I'd probably sum it up in like this review. So it's, if I could give them 0 stars, I would, but that's not an option. Horrible experience. Had to go back at least 4 times for them to fix the same cavity. Now a year later, after them triple checking my insurance for all the work and telling me it was covered 100%, and I'm still having issues with the fillings they did. They are sending me a text, not a bill, saying I owe them money. I do not recommend this dentist office. Staff is very rude. So Josh, welcome. Thanks for coming on. And this is why he sold his practices. Yeah. No.
Did you find like the one bad review out of all of those?
Yeah, it took a while. Wow. He's got a lot of good ones. That one took some deep diving in there.
Yeah, for sure.
Yep, that's funny.
Hey Josh, how you doing?
I'm good. So happy to be here. I would say behind every person you see or dentist you see is a spouse that's probably more amazing. So I really want to say my wife is so solid, such a hard worker, and she does it all the home stuff, all the family stuff, right? And without her, I wouldn't be able to do anything. And as I've met people online, and then I meet them in person, and then I meet their wives, I'm always like blown away, right? Like. You just meet the spouses of these folks, and they're just such dynamic, powerful people, and things start to click in my brain. Like, oh, this makes sense. Alex.
And I mean, in our situation, you're referencing Alex. You should be referencing me. I think she's the person and I'm the spouse. I think that's the difference.
No. You're saying that like behind everything is the important person, and this is why we love you, Josh. Because you always say the right things.
Yeah.
And makes me feel good. So, but yes, your wife is amazing, and yeah.
But yeah, thanks for coming on. So, I figured you'd be fun to bring on because you kind of built this powerhouse of a practice, right? It's all jokes with like one bad review. We all have crappy reviews, right?
Yeah.
But like for us, you were a huge mentor, right? And we kind of used you. We let you make all the mistakes and do all the stuff because you were like 2 or 3 years ahead of us. And like, not just us, but probably, 30, 40, 50 other dentists kind of used you as a test to see like what works, what doesn't work, right? And I mean, we didn't end up getting to like the amount of practices or production level that you did with there, but it was definitely, we wouldn't have gotten to where we are.
Well, yeah, Josh, you shared the playbook with all of us, so that was so helpful. And you're always just so giving, with your knowledge and stuff like that. So, and we trust you a lot. So anyway.
Yeah. So now you can give more to us on this podcast, right? So the one piece that I think is really different from like what the route you took to where we did is we had 2 practices, but we always just leased everything, right? Like I feel like where you kind of differentiated one big way was you got really heavy into, I have my asset as a practice, but now there's potential to have an asset as like the actual building or own the real estate or the land or whatever. So can you go through a little bit of your story about like what made you really realize that using real estate or anything like that can be such an advantage in like what you did?
Yeah, I will for sure. So with our first practice, we leased, right? When you're doing a startup, banks don't want to lend you. They want to lend you the least amount possible, right? So when you're starting out, you're probably leasing. I was in a building with our dental practice, which was small, very efficient. I can't remember the square footage, but 6 ops, I don't know, 1,800 square feet, something efficient, whatever the normal was. And the owner of the building was a very well experienced developer in town. He built a lot of shopping centers all over the region, and a lot of real estate comes down to timing. And so he had just needed cash at that time. And so I got lucky. I don't know if I was reading a book or listening to a podcast, and I was like, I should just reach out. So I just kind of reached out to him, and it just happened to be a time where, he needed cash, and he'd already had this building with 2 tenants in it, right? So he wasn't really going to increase the value of the building. So like now is a good time for him to sell. He's an older guy, so he shot me a price. I shot him a price probably 25% lower back. And then he shot me one in the middle and said final offer, right? And I ran the numbers, and it was like, okay, I this is a 70-year-old experienced guy, right? He's not going to dink around with me. It's just take it or leave it. And so I said yes, and that was the first one there. Yep. I invited my partner. With my model, we got super busy, and when you get super busy, you can do a few things. One, you can bring on associates, you can cut insurances, or you can bring on partners. I'm a people person. I love people. I love helping people, and I love doing things with people. And so I was like, hey, I'll bring on partners, right? And so my first partner at that time, I might have had 2 dentists. No, I think it was 1 partner at that time. And so I said, hey, I'm going to do this. Do you want to do this too? Just be very inclusive. And he's more risk averse. And so he, just wasn't interested. So I just did it. So.
Nice. Wow. Yeah. And I mean, so then after that, you kind of got like a taste of like real estate. And I'm assuming you must have liked it enough, because which practice did you end up doing it straight from the ground? Like you built the building, you did all that.
Yeah. This is a little longer story, but I'm happy to tell it. So, and I want to say too, every year I put everything I do into categories, right? 4 categories based off of if I'm passionate about it and I'm good at it, right? And I try to stick with the things that I'm passionate and good at, and either get rid of the rest or delegate the rest, right? And so I'd wanted to be a real estate developer in like undergrad in Seattle, right? I was like, it'd be so cool to build buildings like these skyscrapers, retail, apartments. Like I was like, this is so cool. But my parents, my mom was a school nurse, my dad was a school counselor, right? Like I didn't understand like, how do you even do this, right? So I took like maybe 1 construction management class in school, and I did business because I wanted to like take over the world, just like do big things, right? But I was stuck in like 5 internships in downtown Seattle. I take the bus downtown during the summer or during the school year, right? Ride the bus, which isn't fun. I sit in a cubicle for hours doing monotonous, dumb stuff. I could have died and probably nobody would have noticed, right? Like,
yeah,
just brutal. And then back to take the bus home again. And I was like, this is like terrible. Like, who would want to like commute into downtown every day and then commute back? Like, I can't do this, right? And so it really gave me clarity on like, these are the things I want to do. And I had like a list of 11 things in my heuristic, and I looked at everything, like working at Blockbuster. Like, I didn't care. I was just like, what am I going to be passionate about? And at the end of the day, it came down to real estate development and dentist. Ironically, those
wow.
are the two that met all my criteria.
Yeah.
And I was like, I just literally don't know how to do real estate development, right? And so I was like, dentist, you get to take care of, we all know this. You get to take care of people, run a business.
Just to take a quick aside on it, what came together between those? Because like, when you were taking those tests or whatever you were doing, like, what personality traits seemed to get you to both those?
I'd have to pull up my heuristic. I might still have it somewhere, but it was like, have an impact on others. When you're stuck in a cubicle, you don't feel like you have any impact.
Yeah. Okay.
Right? Run a business. Build stuff, whether you're building a dental practice or building a building, right?
Okay.
Yep.
Work with the team that you're picking, like people you want to work with, right?
Okay. Yeah.
Yeah, there were, I forget what the other like 8 were or 7 were, but yeah. So ironically, yes, they do share a lot of the same.
Yeah. So
Wow.
yeah. I feel like you're one of the few then that took one of those tests and actually followed it like 10 plus years later and are like, I'm doing those exact 2 things.
Yeah.
So it wasn't a test. I made my own heuristic, right? I just went through like my 5 internships and it was like, this is what I like. This is what I don't want to do, right? So here are the 11 characteristics or heuristic, which is kind of an interesting word. And yeah, started applying it to everything. And then, so I did business for the first 2 years. And so when I came with dentistry, then I tacked on 2 more for science. So I was honors finance. And then I did dentistry after that, the 2 years of science.
Okay, cool.
Wow.
All right. So then that's the background on it. So then you've already done the first practice, did some real estate. All right, let's go back to the ground up.
Yeah. Okay. So let's say you're doing one practice and you're doing well. Okay. What I know now, and like you said, I'm always happy to share because like it's really painful being a dentist in many ways, many blessings are very painful, right? And so if I can go through it and help others just shorten their path, right? Less pain, shorter path to where they want to go, then like I'm always happy to do that. That just feels like the best, a great use of my time to help others that way, right? Like,
yeah.
So now what I know is one practice or 30, right? Is what I tell people, right? Grow your one practice really big because you're the special sauce, right? Create the lifestyle you want, create the profitability you want. Like do that or do like a franchise or large growth model, right? But don't do the in-between. You're just kind of dinking around, right? But at that time, like every year, just like you look at what you're doing, what you love, what you don't love, you also look at like your vision changes every year, right? So at that time I was in like, hey, we're doing well. Like at first, it was the hardest thing I ever did. I made no money my first year, all the normal problems, employees not showing up to work, all the stress, drugs getting stolen from work, like all the normal stuff, right? You're like, this is terrible, right? But if you just stick with it, you build that one practice, you figure it out. But we kind of figured it out after probably 3 years. We were the largest in town out of like, 100 practices that have been there 30 years, right? So that's the compound effect, right? We just did everything, not everything, but on average in most things about 20% better, right? You just compound that, right? A 20% annual return, if you run the math, you will own the world in not too long, right? Like 20% is pretty good. Yeah. So after 3 years, those things that we were doing, serving the patients, like the little things we were doing, compounded. Now we're the largest in town, right? So that gave me the belief that if I took that 20% and brought it to other practices, right, we could reinvent dentistry in our area, right? customer focused, patient service, team focused. Okay, so that was the passion in my mind, the vision, the painting in my mind that I had to paint. So you can do that two ways. One is acquisition, which you basically just have to get the team on board there, right? You have to go in culturally, help them trust you, help them buy into the vision, and you pretty much make that work. Okay. The other way is ground up, de novo. And for me, I like everything stacked in my favor because we know how hard it is to execute, right? So if I say no to the good, say yes to the great. So I'm a relationship guy. One of my friends, guy I went to high school with, actually his brother, he was a little younger, was a broker in town, smart guy. I was looking for places to build. I did the whole math. Like, here are the places where the opportunity is, where demand is, right? You want everything stacked in your favor. So the demographics right here. This location he sent me was a portal for all these small towns for the next 2 hours. This is where they came into town. Okay. So all these people in the rural area would drive into like the Walmart right here, right? And if they wanted to come downtown for medical services, they'd come through this area. And so I'm like, okay, we're not only pulling from this really small city outside our big city that's growing super fast. It wasn't like a high-end wealth city, but it was growing super fast. And you get the pull from the country folk coming in, right? So, and it's only one road. So I'm like, we're at the nexus here. There's only one other practice there. They don't offer, it's just normal general dentistry, right? Monday through Thursday. He'd had some extra stuff like he did like endo and extractions. But so we're like, hey, let's put everything under one roof. Ortho, pedo, general. When mom brings her kids in to go to Walmart to go shopping, right? They can do all the dentistry one place.
Yeah. Super smart. Yeah.
Good. So like macro, the geography needed. We're trying to solve this mom's problem. That was my avatar. And then the land, when you get into land development, you have like raw land, right? And then you have like land with services like water, sewer nearby, right?
Okay.
And then you have land that's already been flattened, already has sidewalks, already has water and sewer literally to like your building. Okay. So a bank had already done all of that for us.
Oh, nice. So when you came in, you were in scenario 3, which was everything was ready minus just putting the building up.
Yeah. The roads are like everything was done. Yeah. And it was like, the land was like $850 a square foot. And if you've ever tried to buy land, I mean, like on a nice street, like a busy street in town, you're probably paying $30, $35 a square foot, right? This is a busy street at $850 with everything already there, right? No brainer.
Okay, wow. Yeah.
Okay. So just like when people come to you and say, hey, how do you build a successful practice? You're like, about 1,000 things, 1,000 little things, right? Yeah. So with real estate, it's the same thing. You need to optimize at every level. Okay. So we've already had the macro, we already have the piece of land that we're getting at a good price. And then the next thing is like, okay, how do you maximize your lot, right? And typically you can build a building on about 20% of the land. Okay. So take your land square footage, divide it by 5. That's how big your building can be.
Okay. Yeah.
Okay. So this thing was about 2 acres. So we came up with about 16,000 square feet. Okay.
All right.
2 is, how tall do you want to go? Right. Well, if you start doing the research, elevators are super expensive.
Okay. I would think too, like just maintenance and all that other. I would think even like doing maintenance on it and just it's another piece that you have to deal with, right? Yeah.
It's a moving part, right? It's expensive. Yeah. So a much smarter thing to do is like one floor or tons of floors, right? Typically.
Okay. Yeah.
Okay, unless the land is super expensive, then maybe you want to go 2 stories if the land was very expensive. But, so I knew, okay, so 1 story, 20%, 16,000 square feet, which means you have plenty of parking, right? And then there's always that question you hear people ask, like, well, do I put a drive-through on the end, right? Those tend to get higher dollar per square foot. And you got to find the right tenant, right? You're kind of like narrowing your scope of tenants for that one spot if you do that. So I did it on one side of our.
So just to take a step back, you were building a building to not just put your practice in, unless you were planning on doing drive-through dentistry, right? So you were building something that you were going to put other tenants in there that were non-dental related.
Yeah. So before the show, I asked Eric to, when I go deep, to pull me back out, and so he's great at this. So yes, when I'm like, okay, when you look at like income streams for yourself, right, and wealth building, it's like, dentistry is very hands-on. Real estate, especially retail, is very passive, right? All the work's on the front, finding the tenants, getting them set up. Then after that, you have a property manager managing it for 3%, right? Super cheap compared to like an Airbnb manager that's like 20%, right? So all your work's on the front. So I'm looking at this land and I'm like, yeah, we'll put a dental practice out here, but gosh, I'm bringing medical services to these people who don't have medical services for like this little township and the 3 hours around. Why not put there's no other medical building there. Why not let's build the first medical building, like for everybody, right? For everything. So I start knocking on doors. Like I find an optometrist who's got a growth mindset, right? She signs a lease. I find, actually that was the only one I found. And that was big enough between her practice and my practice. What's great about retail is it's super passive after you get it built and get the tenants in there. What's bad about retail is the banks won't lend on it unless you have signed leases. And tenants don't want to sign leases unless you have a building. Massive catch-22.
Ooh,
yeah.
Yikes.
Yep.
So, but I knocked on doors. I literally just went into people's businesses, right? And talked to them. So got enough to build the building. While we were building the building, it's always about your team, right? And you guys know this, like you're only as good as your team or your weakest link. So I try to find like the best brokers in town. And so there's one broker, he's the number one office broker in medical office, right? It's like, nice guy, go get her. And so I brought him on board as well. I mean, I could knock on all the doors in my town and talk to people, but that takes a lot of time, right? And so he has relationships, et cetera. So he found one of the largest medical groups. They put an occupational medicine practice in there. And then he brought a physical therapy practice as well. And then we just got a home health clinic in there as well. So now it's
you're a
wow.
It's a building. So how big is the whole building?
You said about 16.
Okay, I didn't know if he was including like the parking with it too. Okay,
so 16,000. Okay. So yeah, that's
So I mean, if you figure out most dental practices
are
practice say like 3,000 square feet or a little bit less, right? Depending on how big you want to be. So you can get maybe 5 tenants in there, maybe? Because I would assume, this is an interesting question, is dental one of the smaller footprint healthcare like buildings? Like if you were an optometrist or you were a doctor's office, or do you need more space or not?
I think it depends if you're starting doing like inpatient, like surgery, whatnot, right? Just like when you're a dentist, you start adding surgery rooms, right? Like you've kind of grown your business. It's similar. So if you're just like people come in, do little quick visits, like a doc in a box type stuff, you don't need much space. But once you start doing surgeries, et cetera, at the place, that's when the clinics start getting larger. Okay. So typical retail, right? And you got to go for redundancy. Let's say I just wasn't able to get medical tenants, right? So the rule of thumb for each space is 1,600 square feet. Okay. So because my lease was early, right? Like we knew with intent we were building the building for the dental practice and we wanted to do everything under one roof. That's a 5,400 square foot practice.
Okay.
Orthopedo general. And then the optometrist, I asked her like, how much square foot do you want? Right. Mm-hmm. And so we knew those two pieces. And then you try to make your remaining pieces that you got to fill in about 1,600 square feet.
Yeah. That makes sense.
And then if they're contiguous, you can give one person 2,000, right?
Yep.
You don't want to make one smaller than like 1,200, but you can kind of chop them up as you go. The last one's always the hardest one to fill because this is the only option people have.
Yep.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Yeah. Makes sense.
Yep. That makes sense.
Good.
Nice. Okay. That all makes sense. So how long did that whole process take?
So when you're learning something, it takes a long time, right? You got to be patient with yourself and you got to know like 10,000 hours, 5 years before you get good at something, right? So on this process, I have all this, like I have like every project I do, and I break it down to like years, return per year, right? So I
That
reflect.
makes
Wow.
sense. No, that makes sense knowing you that you would
You know
do
what I mean?
this. Yeah.
So
Big
I really
spreadsheet.
try to
Yeah.
learn. But off the top of my head, I would probably say it was from close on land to certificate of occupancy, which is when the city says you can now open your practice and
Okay.
serve people. Probably 2.5 years,
Okay.
maybe
Yeah.
3.
So it's a
Yeah.
project. I mean, that's a project.
Yeah.
Nice.
Yeah.
And I mean, so since doing that now, looking because okay, so now, so we understand people listening. When did you get that certificate of occupancy? Like what month and year was that? So then we know how long you've had it.
I want to say April or May of 22.
Okay, so it's been three
Okay.
3 years, right? So 3 years into the future now, has that turned into like it is a pretty passive investment for you? You're making money on it. You're happy with your decision.
Yeah.
Yeah.
When you look at real estate investing, the safest investment is always going to be one that you occupy
Okay.
by far. And then
And
second to
why?
that is
Why is
bigger,
that?
bring other tenants in, you occupy part of it, right?
Okay.
And so the lowest hanging fruit for dentists is to buy the building you're in. Okay.
Okay.
If your practice is growing and you could grow into a bigger practice in a new building, then financially it will work out. But if you're in a 6-op practice that you're leasing and you want to build a building to do another 6-op practice, the numbers will not pencil.
Okay.
So
That
do
makes sense.
not. So when someone says, I'm like, oh, how's your practice going? Oh, we started at 1 million. Now we're 2 million. We're on target for 3 million this year, or 4 million. Like it's just growing, right?
Yep.
Mm-hmm.
I know this is a grower. And then I'm like, yeah, go build your own building, but ideally bring some other tenants in. It'll really grow the wealth piece for you too. But if somebody is like, yeah, we're doing like 1.3 this year. We did like 1.1 last year, and I can just tell they like dentistry, but they're not hungry, right?
Yep.
Mm-hmm.
Then it does not make financial sense to do your own building.
Okay.
Okay. So
Well,
that's good.
so
Good to
like,
know.
and then so to pivot a little bit on that, because I remember you had mentioned this. Maybe it was a few months ago. We were talking about something with like investing or like how you see your practice versus just doing passive income or investing in other stuff. And you brought up a good concept that I wanted you to kind of like share a little bit more. Go in. I'm gonna let you deep dive into this, right? I won't reel you in on this one, Josh. But on the concept of how you invest when you're trying to grow wealth versus preserve wealth. And to give a little backstory on this, when our practices were doing well and we were growing, you make a good amount of money. You make a lot of money doing that, right? And so you're actively growing. And then we got into that trap where it's like, oh, well, now you just have to work towards freedom, right? Make everything passive right away. So we got into, either other investments or deals, and we kind of, I think, I lost track aside a little bit of like, well, what phase am I actually in? Am I like now, I don't have enough money where I'm in this like preservation of wealth. Do I still need to be heavy on, growth? So can you go through that? Because that was pretty eye-opening for me when you explained it. If you like our podcast, check out Alex's newsletter, Just 2 Minutes. It's full of great advice, which makes sense considering it's her thoughts and not me sidetracking her every 2 seconds. You can subscribe at coupleofdentists.com. The link is in the show notes. Now, back to the pod.
Yeah. So how do people actually build wealth? Okay. So I read stuff, but I also look anecdotally, right? You got to look through multiple filters to catch yourself when you're BSing yourself, right?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
So anecdotally, the other day I built a wealth pyramid, right? Because somebody was asking a question and I was like, all right, chat GPT, build this out to me in a visual. They didn't do a great job. It's going to take me time to get it pretty, but I'll tell you. And then I think that'll help answer your question. Okay. So when I think of the wealthiest folks out there that I know, It is tech startups.
Okay.
Okay. So tech startups, like the wealthy people you think of, like Facebook, Google, right? Like all these companies, tech startups, they make the most money. And the reason they make the most money is scalability,
Okay.
right? When it's a software, you just sell the software.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah,
You can
yeah.
just, yeah, it's $100 a month and you can get its recurring revenue and it's,
You just
yeah.
get more
Yeah.
people on, and your costs
Yeah,
are usually
scalable.
fixed. Yep.
Okay. The next one that I just anecdotally when I think about it is family offices, generational wealth. Okay.
Okay.
Grandpa was an oil baron, right? Or whatever. Okay.
Yeah.
In both of those, and then the next one's large business owners, medium business owners. Okay. Small business owners who invest in real estate and other businesses. Small business owners who invest in 401ks, HSA, IRAs, and then small business owners who don't invest. And then W-2 earners who invest in 401k, HSA. And then the last one is W-2. You get the pyramid?
Okay, so you're getting up the pyramid.
Yeah, I get the point. Yeah.
So most doctors, okay, physicians, what tier of that 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9 tier are most doctors?
I get a guess. Okay,
Isn't
so
that
my
like
guess
4?
would be is if you're talking probably more doctors or saying a dentist who's an employee, they're going to be in that bottom tier of W-2, right? And they're probably in W-2 who's doing 401ks and just what their financial advisor tells them. That's my guess.
That's it. That's the bottom tier, right? You're a doctor, right? You're an orthopedic surgeon who works for the hospital, right? You're either the bottom tier W-2 earner, or if you like do the 401k and actually like maximize that stuff in the HSA, you're tier 2 out of 9, right?
Yeah.
So as I started like just pumping this out and visualizing it, really, where do people make money? They make money. Oh, this wasn't the final version. I added some real estate on there. Okay. Like large business owners and real estate developers. Okay. Like anecdotally, the wealthiest people in the Spokane area, right? We're not like a tech area, right? The wealthiest people that I know, 100 million, 200 million, 500 million, a billion, real estate contractors and developers.
Okay.
So when you think about that, okay, large businesses, family offices, tech startups, real estate developers, these people all are making their money in a business of some sort.
Yep.
Okay. Nobody gets rich off of 401k. Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. So, okay. And I get lost sometimes. Eric, what was the core question that we were going for?
Yeah, no, this is good.
Go through the whole.
It was like the whole concept of when like you're actively growing wealth, right, versus trying to preserve wealth.
Versus grow. Okay, so when you think about this, how do you actively grow wealth? Is in a business. That's really how you do it. Okay. So what's nice about dentistry is if you want to, you can have a dental business, right?
Yep.
Now, if you're in the top 5% of dental businesses, I don't know, let's say 5 million is the number, like your net worth, okay? Eventually, right? Or 10 million, or whatever the number is. If you're in the top 5% of like tech startups, the top 5% of real estate developers, right? You're like a minimum 100 million, right?
Yeah, exactly.
So I'm very thankful for dentistry, and it's great, but like, there's other games out there.
Yeah. So you're picking what game you want to play, right? Do you feel like having experience as a dentist owner, multiple practice owner, and now doing real estate, where you anchored the top 5 dentists as maybe a 10 million net worth and the top 5 real estate developers like 100 million plus, do you think doing the real estate is 10x harder, or is it not 10x harder? So it's like, why you're just playing the wrong game. If your goal is to maximize your wealth, right? Yeah.
Dentists are smart. Like, I love my dentists. I love talking to this. They're smart people. They're hardworking people. They care about others, right? Like, we've got a good dentists in general are a great group of people, right? But we're playing a harder game.
Yeah.
Okay. If you took every dentist and you said, okay, you're going back to college to be like a computer scientist or something, right? I guarantee you their income levels would be much higher than they would be as dentists on average.
Okay. Yeah, I get what that means. You're saying if you're
Makes
coming
sense?
in with a certain level of intelligence and you picked a different game to play with that level of like determination and intelligence, you're probably going to do better from a money standpoint in a different field.
Yeah. But we don't
Yep.
know until we're doing it, right? We figure this out as we
Yeah.
go. This is hindsight's 2020, right?
Yeah.
But each year, what you do is a choice, right? Yeah, you put a lot of money into dentistry. Yeah, you put a lot of money into dental school, right? But each year, you got to look at your passions and your proficiencies, okay, and make a choice. And for me, I just stopped being passionate about the dental stuff. And I continue to be passionate about the real estate, right? So I was like, well, I'm going to spend time and get proficient at the real estate because this is what I'm passionate about. And people are much more successful in life and much happier when they're following their passions.
Okay.
Uh-huh. Yeah,
Good.
that makes sense. And that's kind of a similar path, right? Like, I know for me at least, when I was in dental school, I still loved the clinical part like you. I like taking care of patients. I think I like helping people in general. But I also, in fourth year, met with our dean and was like, hey, can we learn how to like value a practice? So like I had, I guess, some initial things where I was like, I had, like I don't know if I would have done dentistry if there was no path to owning a business.
Yes.
I really don't think I would have ever done it. Like I still like it, but I think it had to have that piece for me to say yes. So I kind of found that was probably like an early indicator that I should have maybe, like you said, hindsight's 2020. But the second that we built practices and I saw what that was, that's where I like,
yeah, you should have
spent
done that list.
I spent all that time. It was, I instead of focusing on like I'm going to learn how to do, all on fours and all that, it was like, no, I want to figure out how to like get my margins better or how can I save money here? And that's where like I started to go more passionately into. And so, yeah, I mean, yeah, that is a good point, Josh. What about you, Alex?
Well, I don't know. It's kind of the same. I mean, I probably would have chosen a different profession if we couldn't have owned a practice and like made all the rules kind of the thing. So, yeah, I think we're all kind of hardwired that way a little bit.
Yeah.
But I think we just kind of, with us, with like selling the practices and stuff like that, it was like, well, what else is there? Like we can do this game pretty well and figure it out. And we can do the 30 practice thing and build our, cluster of dental offices and stuff. But is that what we want to do? It is a hard game. Like Josh said, right? It's like, it sucks a lot of the time. And it's like, okay, well, is there like an easier route? Like, can we maximize like what we can bring to the table in just a different game? So.
Yeah. And so, yeah, that's a good point. Because I even know, like, on one of the, I was jokingly, like, kind of going back and forth with someone who had posted recently on Facebook about how, like, dentistry and owning a practice is the easiest job they ever had. And I was like, I don't know if that really tracks. Like, I mean, I think I posted, I was like, dude, one summer I, like, scanned IDs at a community pool. That was significantly easier than owning and running a practice. So, like, I get it that you can make it a lifestyle practice for yourself. And if that is your goal, I think you can do it pretty stress-free.
Sure.
But then, then you just have to know, I'm probably going to max out at maybe $1 million a year. I'm going to work 3 days a week. I've got a good, but if that's not the game you want to play, then it is a tough game.
And most dentists don't, you say $1 million in 3 days a week. Yes, you totally can. But most dentists don't get out of their own way, hire a good coach, right? To help them get there, right? They struggle and they average, whatever, 180 is like average income. But let's say private practice, I don't know, 300, right? Mm-hmm. So they never quite get to that $1 million, even though it's accessible through learning from others who've done it.
Oh yeah, and I was saying the practice. I was saying like the practice is doing $1 million, not your take home.
Okay, sorry, take home.
Yeah, no.
I would hope that if people, just for my fellow friends, I would hope that you find a coach and who can coach you to take home $1 million and enjoy it and do 3 days, right? I mean, if you're going to do it anyways, you might as well learn from somebody and learn to do it in the ideal way for yourself, right?
No, and you know, one other thing that I think you've done well, you give us this advice again, right? Like these are all these indirect things that I think, these nuggets that you give that you may not realize have the intention they do, but they do in a really powerful way, is when you had said something a while back, we were at some meeting or something like that, and I remember you saying, when you were trying to figure out your real estate stuff, you're like, I'm not going to go to like another dentist who owns a couple practice, I'm going to go to the guy in my town, Spokane, who's like the biggest guy. Like, why am I going to stay within dental?
Yeah.
If I'm looking at real estate, I'm going to anchor to like the most successful person I know in real estate, not the most like a successful dental real estate person. So that was a pretty good piece of advice too that you would give. I don't even know if you remember saying that, but that was helpful.
No, I I don't, but I did do it. So yeah, that makes sense. Okay, let's get back to your original question.
Yeah, sorry. Yes.
This is how I talk. I always have to give people the why and the context, right?
Yeah.
So preservation of wealth versus growing wealth. So number one way to grow wealth, run a business. Okay. That's like the take home there. Okay. And the more scalable your business is, which we can't really get to in dentistry because it's so hands-on, but the more scalable your business. And that's why I like the people who do dental services, marketing companies, tech companies in dental make so much more money, right? Because the tech software is scalable, right? It's hard as heck to get it off the road, off the ground. Most of them fail, right? Much higher failure rate than dentists, right? But if you can get through the initial, you guys have your wonderful software Ordo, right, for dental supplies. So you guys know this than anyone else, like, it's brutal getting through those first few years, right? But if you can get to take off long term, it's a much better thing. Okay, so anyway, so starting a business is the best way to grow wealth. And then I'll talk about the second best way, which I think is what we're kind of going to. But on the preservation of capital, preservation of capital is about not losing money. Okay. And how do you do that? I mean, even Warren Buffett, he only really hits it on 4% of his things. Okay. Why do people love Berkshire Hathaway? Because it's a fund, right?
Yeah.
Overall, even though he's only really hitting 4% of the time, some of those hits are like Apple, right? So you just like astronomical returns, right? So it's about preservation of capital, which is like diversifying into different asset classes, just not losing your money. Okay. And it's about long-term mindset because, there's always risk for things to lose money in the short term, but if you structure it so, stocks go up eventually, right? Real estate, like solid real estate, goes up eventually, right? So when I think about preservation of capital, I think of diversification. I think of minimizing risk. Okay. The equivalent to real estate is if you ever look at they call them, what's the word for this? I'm just blinking this morning, but basically like a Wendy's, right, is up for sale, or a Starbucks. One building with a corporate tenant with like a 10-year lease. Okay. The brokers call them coupon clippers, right? They're super expensive, right? But the perception is like a really low risk, right? Because we think this company is going to be around a long time, but your returns aren't very good. Like right now, because interest rates are high, these coupon clippers, you pretty much have 0% cash flow.
Okay. Oh, wow. Okay.
Why do people still buy these? You see a lot of like old guys, 60-year-olds, 70-year-olds, they get a 1031 where they sell another building, right? And then they want to be done. They just want to focus on their life. And so they try to find the least risky asset, right? And apartment buildings are usually so large, so it usually ends up being like small apartment buildings, but most likely it's a retail, like a one-tenant retail building. Make sense?
Okay. Yep. And so just to get, and so what they want to do is, because they're at that age, they're transferring it into, you said a 1031, which that, I guess, is the advantage of that. They don't have to pay taxes on the proceeds of that first thing, right? And so for them, they're trying to preserve wealth, so they don't care as much if the cash flow is not great because they're trying to just minimize.
And let me clarify. You did great. I said it wrong. It doesn't cash flow when you put down 25% in cash and 75% in debt. What they typically do is put 50% down in cash on these 1031s, 50% debt, and then it cash flows for them too.
Okay.
Low risk in cash flows. So that's the example of like preservation of wealth within real estate. Outside of that, index funds, dollar cost averaging, things that a financial planner would tell you, right? Those are the things that.
So then would you tell someone then, like, if you've got your practice, it's like focus your time and energy, like you said, on what you're passionate about and what you're good at. So for a lot of dentists, it probably is doing dentistry, right? Like, you might be a little bit more of the anomaly, Josh, where you had such a passion for something outside of dentistry. But I would imagine a decent amount of dentists like dentistry. So it's like grow your practice, do that well, and then with the money you're making, would you tell people then that's the part you're trying to preserve, right? So is that where you're, or like
Depends on
what's
age.
your thought?
Depends
Okay,
on
yeah.
age. So you start with, you're 100% right. Focus on your practice, right? If you're making 200-300 grand a year, well, I did the math the other day for a bunch of people. If you're making 300 grand a year as a new practice owner, you're literally negative between the debt on the practice and the debt on the dental school.
Oh, yeah.
Okay.
Yep.
Right? Because your
Yeah.
300 grand turns into 200 grand with
Yep.
taxes,
Yeah.
right? And then you got
Yep.
a debt service, right? You're literally negative at 300 grand. Okay.
Oh yeah, and that's like the same thing we realize with like separate note when you're selling a practice, right? I think a lot of people forget that there's probably a loan on that practice. And so when you're doing your math, you're like, "Oh man, I'm worth, $3 million or $10 million, whatever that is." You may also forget that if you bought a bunch of those buildings recently and there's a lot of debt on them, that it's probably half of that. So yeah, I get that concept, yeah.
And then you have to take out capital gains tax for active. If you own your practice, it's 20%. If you're passive investor, it's 23.8%. Then you have to take out depreciation recapture, which is 25% of all the depreciation, right? And you want to max your depreciation so your income's higher in your early years, right?
Yep.
So if you take the depreciation recapture with the capital gain tax, like the rule of thumb I use is 40% in taxes.
Jeez.
Okay, wow. Yeah.
Okay. There's ways to handle all that, but I like the reality. This is what most people step into because they don't understand it, so they just do it, and then now they owe all this money. Okay. So stepping back, number one is maximize your practice, right? And we're all good at different things. Some of it's clinical, some of it's business. Like you, Alex and Eric, you guys are both good at both, but it's just, you got to figure out what your strengths are, and then find a coach, right? We have friends that coach on this. Spencer Greer is a major. Like amazing salesman, right? But not a sleazy salesman, and like a listening and connecting with people salesman, right? Like he's so good at that.
Yep.
And then Steve Vandergrift, like such a nice guy, so smart, lifestyle practice, right? He's a lifestyle coach, like even branded lifestyle coach, right? Like he's super good at like creating a very profitable practice that fits your lifestyle. That was something I was never good at. Like I'm a worker, right? Like seeing my kids as a dentist running a practice, like I wasn't good at that, right? He's much better at that. So Chris Green, startups, like we have these friends that are great. Paul Etchison, right? Like so good at the coaching.
Yeah.
Find a coach. Maximize who you are, right? Yeah. It might be 400 grand, it might be 500 grand, but if you're not finding a coach who's actually done it themselves and is high integrity, you're going to spend years wasting your energy, wasting your time, wasting your stress. So maximize that income. I know I'm preaching to the choir here, but for the listeners.
No. Yeah, totally. And I think part of that is like, and then figure out I think you, and like you said, your vision can change, but maybe figure out first before you just go out and like draw a coach out of a hat, right? Like figure out what niche or anything like that you're trying to grow to, because like you said, you want to try to find a coach who's good at that specific thing, right? Like we have some friends, like you said, that are like crush it with patient communication and case acceptance. And then you've got another guy who's just awesome with systems, right? Or someone else who's great with startups. So I think it's figure out what your goal is and then find the person to fit that, right? Yeah.
Nailed it. Good clarifier.
Yeah.
Okay, finally getting to the piece. So now that you're producing income, right? You got to think you're going to pay taxes, right? And then you're going to pay off your student debt, pay off your practice debt, and then you're going to have enough left over. Okay. And I tell people you really want to be at 500K or more. Okay. When I see somebody at 500 to 800K, I'm like, okay, as long as they don't have like an expensive lifestyle, they're really going to be at a place where they're creating a profit margin that they're going to have time margin in their life to live a good life. Okay.
Yeah. Okay.
So you need that margin. So now we're at 500, 800K. Now you're churning off, let's say 200K a year in net investable, right? You could blow it on a Lamborghini or you can invest it. Most dentists are pretty prudent, right? So they invest it. Okay. I have visual models on this. I'll try to keep this simple. Okay. So we've talked about preservation of capital, really boring for like 60 to 70-year-olds, right? They just want to like retire and do nothing. And they typically own their home already, don't have any debt on their home, right? So they don't need a lot of money to live, right? Okay. We've talked about growing wealth. Well, the ideal way is to run a business, and we know these big businesses that are worth hundreds of millions. Okay, but if we're dentists, we talked about maximizing that business. And now it's like, how do we grow wealth? Yeah, we don't want to lose our money. That's number one. But how do you actually grow it at a curve that it's going to be impactful in your life?
Okay.
Because putting, the money into a 401k and then investing it in the stock market, yeah, it's better than what most people do, right? But it doesn't really create a ton of money. And I think the example I put in last time, I think it was 25 years, maybe 20 years. I think I did 20 years. 20 years at 200K a year invested at stock market returns, okay, 8 to 10%. But you got to take out inflation, okay, because we're talking about real buying power, right? That's what really matters. So on average, inflation, if you look at like shadow stats and how they used to measure inflation, it's always higher than what it is, okay? So let's say 2.5 is like maybe the number off the top of your head. Shadow stats and all these, how they used to run it might be like 6%. I just say conservative. Let's just say it's 4%. Realistically, inflation is 4%. Okay, and we see that, right? When we go to buy something, we know prices go up a lot, right?
Yep.
Okay. Mm-hmm. When you try to hire someone to mow your lawn or like just basic stuff, right?
Yeah.
Okay.
So you have, like you're saying, you have to model that out 20 years in the future and say that, the guy I'm paying $30 every time he comes to mow my lawn now, in 20 years, it's going to be $60, right? Yes. Or like, I totally remember, like, I anchor $30,000 as what's a lot for a car. Because I think when I was growing up, it was like, is it over 30 or under 30? And I was always like, oh yeah, I'll get, and this is even before I could buy cars. I think this was when I was like 8 years old, right? This is what I would think. And nowadays, when we were looking at getting another car, you look at stuff, in my head, like I have a Toyota RAV4, just like basic one. In my head, I still have like my 1995 price, which is like, oh, that should be like maybe 18.5, and then if I get the hybrid, it's like 21,000. That's about what it should be. And then you look now and you're like starting at like 32,000. I'm like, what the hell? This is nuts. So yeah, that is a good point that I think we don't think about. Yeah,
it's really, I mean, the government will hold down certain resources to keep them low, which drags down the inflation. But if you think about things that we actually want to buy, it's really like at least 4%. Like gasoline, right? They're artificially suppressing the cost of gas, right? But okay. So we got to subtract it 4%. So 8 to 10%, let's just be generous with stocks, okay? 10% minus 4 is 6% net return.
Yep.
Okay. So if you put this in the math, and I can't remember if I think I used 6%. 200 grand a year invested, 6% compounded, right? Over 20 years. That 200 grand a year turns into 16 million.
Okay.
Yeah. So you have to make enough to put 200 grand a year, right? Yeah. You have to be disciplined, not to dink around with it, right? You just let it go. Okay. So like, that's not bad. Like, I don't have a problem with that, right? It's still 20 years. So you're going to have to make the money first, right?
And you're not taking that money out too, right? Like, that is completely set aside.
Yeah. So you're not like buying the big house and raising your expenses, right? So, and it takes you probably 5 years to get to that point where you're making the 500, 800 grand, or that you can set away 200, right? So you're probably 25-year career, right? So you got to maintain your health that entire time, which we know is very hard, right? It's a slog. Like 16 million sounds great, and it is great if you're doing it, but it's a slog. Okay. Now let's think about other asset classes. Okay. So there's other asset classes that I'm not in control of. Venture capital, right? You talk to venture capitalists, they're like, most of this stuff just fails. I'm only doing it if I'm like the first investors from now on, right? And I still
and when you're saying like venture capital, you're saying like if someone came to you and said, do you want to invest in SpaceX, or do you want to invest in these like kind of startup companies and do that? Okay.
Uber, all that kind of stuff, right? Every once in a while you nail it big, but you got to be in the first like Series A, and you got to know you're going to fail on 20. Okay. That's not really preservation of capital at all, right? Because 19 out of 20 times, you're losing everything you put in. Okay. So you have to think about it, and I'm really going to do 20. But really, do you have the background to evaluate 20 companies, right? Do you have the time to evaluate 20 companies, right? We don't, right?
No.
You don't have the expertise or time. It takes you 5 years to gain that expertise. So really, you want to be investing in things you understand or with people who understand it, that you trust, right?
Yep.
One of our friends invested with his brother and made a bunch of money, right? And his brother was like a solid guy. And I'm like, yeah. You should keep doing that. Your brother's super smart, right? I was like, he's really good, and you trust him. So okay, so when I looked out there at everything, dentistry, like real estate, synergistic with dentistry, right? We understand apartments because we've all rented an apartment at one point, right? So we have a general sense, and then two, we have our practice in a building. So we understand what it's like to be a tenant, right? So those are two areas where we have more familiarity and are places that you can start, okay? If you're doing it on your own. Okay? Yeah, go for it.
No, I was saying that makes sense because you're right. You've kind of gained some of that knowledge just like, I don't know if it's like through osmosis is the right word, but like, you've kind of just gotten it from like personal experience. So that's a good way to look at it.
When people ask me like RV parks, mobile home parks, I'm like, I've never lived in one. I don't have a freaking clue, right? Like, I don't know. I can learn, but like, I'm doing so much of this other stuff. Office is another one. I'm doing so much of the other stuff. Like, I'm not going to spend time learning all that, right?
Yeah.
People send me deals on oil and gas. I'm like, it would take me literally 5 years to understand oil and gas, right? Most of the time, I'm just going to get scammed.
Yep.
Right? Okay. So we know the growth curve, 200 grand a year, 16 million on commitment for stocks. Okay. With real estate, I started doing research. Okay. And the number is 16%. Okay. And
All right. How'd you get there?
Okay. So 7 to 8% cash on cash.
All right. What does that mean?
That means that once you buy a building, you get a loan on it, you put down 25% of the money. Okay. And the bank puts down the other 75%. Rule of thumb, when interest rates haven't recently jacked up, is 7 to 8%. Okay?
So that's saying, let's use math. Let's say for easy math, the building, it's going to be more than that, but it's $1 million. You put down $250K, bank puts out $750K. You're saying you're going to get 7 or 8% on that million or on the 250?
250. Thanks for slowing me down. On your cash you put in, your cash that you get back on the cash you put in.
Okay.
Thank you. This is exactly what I want you to do. Slow me down and
I'll be
7 to 8% in a normal average market, is what you're looking for. Right now, gosh, it's negative 2% to 5% is what I see mostly, right? And so you have to, because prices got escalated as interest rates were low, okay? And now interest rates jacked up high, but people don't want to lower their prices because they know what it was worth not too long ago, right?
Yep.
Yeah.
So you have to have you just have to kind of give it time to settle out again, or you have to have like major catastrophe, right? Or you just look for deals. Okay. So that's one piece. The next piece is, so that's your income. The next, I use the acronym IDEAL. So I don't forget this stuff. Okay. IDEAL. Real estate is ideal. That was your income piece. The next one is depreciation. Okay. Depreciation, just like the dental practice, happens over like a number of years, right? Many years. Okay. I always do a cost segregation, bonus depreciation to move that depreciation up early so I don't pay taxes.
And you're saying with like a building, you're saying like, when you're saying depreciation, you're saying like in a dental practice, you buy a new chair or you buy some big piece of equipment and you're saying that thing has a lifespan of 5 years or whatever the normal is. And can you go through how that kind of works then?
Yeah, like a normal depreciation schedule.
Yeah, is it just really basic? It doesn't even have to, it's just more like conceptually. It's just saying you own a piece of something and you're saying this is going to last 5 years. I spent $100,000 on it. So what are you doing then when you're taking advantage of it? Like just maybe give an example of how you're doing it.
Yeah, I feel like I'm not going to answer the question how you want me to. Can you lead me a little more so I can keep it simple?
No, just like keep it like, third grade level with like conceptual, I guess in real estate, because so far you made up this 7 or 8% of the 16%, right? So now we're trying to make up the rest of the 8% to get there. So now you're in depreciation.
Well, let's use your $1 million building. Okay.
Okay.
In a commercial building, it's a 39-year depreciation schedule. So that million, divide that million by 39, and you
Okay.
basically, that's how much your depreciation is per year. And depreciation is basically like a write-off from the government that says, okay, your income is this, but you subtract your depreciation from that income to get a final income that will tax.
Okay. So basically, if it was, I don't know, I can't do that quick of 50. So I don't know, whatever it is. If it's like a few grand, say, right? If you had $1 million building.
So a million divided by 39 is 25,000 a year. Okay, so you take 25,000 off your income a year.
Okay, and so
Okay.
that needs to be played into that, because that's not, that piece is, you're not getting a higher you're not getting cash percents, but you're saving money in taxes, so you're making money on the back end, kind of, right? So is that how you're
On the front end, it's a guaranteed return. This
okay?
year, I'm going to take 25,000 off my income, right? So whatever your tax rate is, your top tax rate, let's say it's 37%,
Yep.
37%, 25,000. That's your guaranteed return that year.
Okay.
Yeah.
So yeah, okay.
We all know Eric wants more friends. If you're enjoying this episode, share the podcast and then tell them to DM Eric so he can hit his quota of 1 new friend per day. Now back to the episode.
So when I started running this math, so we have something called cost aggregations that take all of the income in the the 3-year, the 5-year, the 7-year, and I can't remember, it might be the 15-year. Anything like different parts of a building are, the government says, fall apart at a faster rate, right? So you take everything that falls apart in like the first 15 years, I think. I know this, I just don't want to do the details right now because we're on a podcast. But then you get to depreciate that when you do a cost aggregation plus bonus depreciation. You, depending on the asset class, it has more of those 3, 5, 7, 15-year pieces to it.
Okay.
Like
Okay.
golf courses and RV parks, things that have like infrastructure in the ground, most of that's in the short term, right?
Okay.
So in those, you can write off like 60% of the value of that thing in the first year.
Okay, so let's do the math again. You got $1 million building. What can you do with, because it's cost segregation, is that an analysis that you're doing? Is
that is breaking down all the pieces of that building into the year classes, and then
so you're segregating all the pieces. Okay. Yeah. And so let's use the example. Let's say it was $1 million, and let's say you bought let's not use RV park, because let's just say you were buying like a commercial building.
Okay.
So how does that look if you did a cost segregation on it?
So the Trump administration is bringing back bonus depreciation, which maximizes your ability to do that. And I just read the first tax code that had it in it this week from the Ways and Means Committee. And I'm going to use that because I'm pretty sure this is what they're going to do, and it keeps it simple. So depending on the asset class, but like retail and apartments, at least 25%. Okay.
That you can bonus. So like you could write off $250,000 if it was $1 million in year one off your income. So if you made $500,000 that year, you're only paying taxes on $250,000. Is that what you're saying?
100%. And you know how taxes are tiered, right? So the amount of tax you're paying at the 500,000 level is much more on that top 100 grand than at the 250. So your actual taxes are probably a third, or not, or a quarter.
Yeah.
And the rule of thumb for retail multifamily, okay, it'll be a minimum of, let's say you're putting 250 grand in and 750 from debt. The money you're putting in, the 250, is what's going to come off your income. That's the easiest way to think of it. If I'm putting 250K in cash, 250K is coming off my income in year one.
Okay. Nice. Okay. So that hits the I. So let's go through ideal. So we hit I, we hit the D. Is this ideal? Like, yeah.
And I'll give you a number for this. Now, if you're bonusing and all that, it really much more impactful than this number, but I'm just using simple math here. In summarizing, we're going to call it 2 1/3%.
Okay.
Or 2 2/3. I forget my model.
So we're close to like 10-ish%, right? That you get. So now you're ahead of yours.
And then the next two are also 2 2/3. So that's how I keep it simple. The next one is equity. So it's principal pay down. You guys know with your dental loans, part's principal, part's debt. And so the size of your loan that you owe goes down each year.
Yep. Yep. Okay. So yeah, just like we were saying earlier, in our situation, we refinanced, I think, right after COVID, because the rates were so low on the practices. But then we sold the practices, like a year or so after. So you had to pay prepayment penalty stuff, which sucks with B of A. But there was still a good amount on there. So I get what you're saying. If we had that practice for 20 years, my chunk when I sold would have been more, because I wouldn't have had as much to take off, because the principal would have been paid down, just like your mortgage.
Up. Yeah. It's more interest the first couple of years, but each year it's smaller interest, more, right? Yep. So if you average that out, again, to keep the model simple, 2 2/3.
Okay, cool.
The next one is appreciation.
Okay.
That is like someone goes, oh, I bought this house for $200,000. Now it's worth $400,000.
Yep.
You got lucky, right? Yeah. Like average appreciation, when you look at it, maybe you could push and say 4%, right? 3% is much more reasonable. I like to use 2 2/3 again to be conservative.
Okay. All right. So now we're on L.
L is leverage, so it doesn't really go into our percent math, but that's what makes it all work, right? You're using bank money. The last one that kind of goes with depreciation is actually interest expense write-off. Right?
Okay.
The interest that you're paying on the loan, you actually.
Yep. Just like we do with our practices. Okay, so I can see how to kind of like bring this back, why it may be, I don't know if easier is the right word, but maybe not as much friction to get better at real estate, because if you've already owned a practice and you're taking a loan out on it, like I already had known, or Alex had known, or you have a mortgage on a house, right? You already knew you could write off the interest expense because you remember your CPA or someone telling you that. So I feel like there's a lot of concepts that we already have kind of already understanding a little bit, or the average person does. So I can see how maybe like it's a little bit easier to get into that versus like something so random like oil and gas, right?
Yep.
Yeah.
So I put all this on one slide for folks when I do this visually, because like this is the one thing I don't want them to forget, right?
Can we share, like, do you ever share that visual? Like, are you open to sharing that if we put it like in the show notes?
I'm an open book. I will send that to you.
Sweet.
Cool. So now you have this visual in your brain that you're never going to forget, right? You keep it with you whenever you get distracted or hear some speech or some sales pitch, right? You go back to stocks, 8 to 10% net of inflation, let's say 6, okay? And then you go to real estate, 16% net of inflation, 12, okay? 12 for real estate in real buying power, 6 for stocks.
Yep.
Okay. The simplest model, okay?
Yeah.
Now you put this into your compounding curve, your same 200,000 a year, okay? Your same 20 years, okay, and I apologize if it's 25 or something, but for this model, it's 54 million.
Oh, geez. So that doesn't even go from like 16 to 32. Yeah, it compounds. Yeah,
16 to 54, sense. Right?
Yeah, geez.
Yeah. So when you're looking at just the simple math of it, right? Like, why would I invest in stocks?
I mean, so my only counter to that would be, and you can help me explain this, is there a way different, is there a lot of risk difference there, right? Because just like if you were saying you were going into venture capital, yeah, you might like 10x your money, but like there's a high chance it's going to go to zero. Is there a pretty similar risk between stocks and real estate?
So stocks are great because they're liquid, right? You can sell it any time. You got to pay taxes, but you sell it any time. Super liquid, and you literally have to do nothing. So I have no problem with stocks, and I feel that like you need your emergency fund, right? But then you also need your like, if shit hits the fan fund, like stocks are a great way to access that. Okay.
Yeah.
So I have no problem with stocks being in a portfolio, right? But if you're trying to get out of the chair, right, quicker, right, you're trying to grow wealth, right? Like, yes, in real estate takes more work. You have to learn it. Okay. You don't need to become an expert. You got to learn it, right?
Yep.
And you got to diversify too. Like some of my buildings are like my average annual return right now on like my buildings that have like gone through things is 53%. Okay.
Oh, wow. Yeah.
Do I believe that I'm going to get 53% forever? No, because then I would be ruler of
you would
Earth.
you would own the you would own the world in a few years. Yeah.
I'm make Zuckerberg look like a sucker, right?
Yeah.
But but I know that if I keep doing deals and I keep getting smarter and smarter, right?
Yeah.
Like on average, I'm going to do very well, right? And 16 is just average, right? Like when you get like decent real estate, like 16, okay? Like because I'm so in it, right? Like dentists ROI on a dentist, like their return on their money in their practice is actually quite high.
Yeah.
Like if you actually calculate how much money you put into a dental practice, right? The banks will
Yep.
do like 0% financing, right? So
Yeah.
like your return on your money in a dental practice is actually much higher than like a stock market return.
Yep.
Which goes back to like grow your practice first, right?
Yeah.
Yep.
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 But once you start growing it and you got to pay taxes, then you get screwed. So with real estate, what you can do is not only get these high returns and get your growth curve and grow your wealth and not be slogging in the chair so long, you can also heavily get the tax piece on the front end. So that 2.2% we were talking about, that like you can blow that number up huge. And that's why these real estate developers who are 100 million, 200 million, 500 million, they are not smarter than you guys. Okay. They are hardworking. They have a risk tolerance, right? But real estate is set up with the tax benefits because the government wants to incentivize real estate people to build real estate because it helps with the economy, both residential and commercial, right? That's why these tax incentives are there. So you will just do a lot better over time if you get passionate about real estate. And if
All
you're
right,
not
so
passionate,
I'm fully giving up dentistry now, Alex. Now I'm just doing real estate. Thanks. You gave me the opportunity I needed to now tell this to Alex. So thanks. As if we don't already have enough going on. But I mean, you did say tech startups are good. So hopefully that one plays out.
Fingers crossed. Yeah.
100%.
Yeah.
No, you're great.
But I was going to say, and you kind of alluded to it, just to kind of wrap all this up then, like with a personal story for me. And I really think having a good network of people and having friends like we have with Josh who are passionate about real estate and can help us with that or whatever other piece it is super important. So I think surrounding yourself always around people who are better than you is really important. And I know for me, so I don't know when Josh, you did, what was it, like a month before COVID? Do you remember when we did that? You put all of us together and we did that like mastermind group.
Oh yeah,
right?
Texas.
So like and how to build stuff. And I was like, I was aching to be like, can he invite me to this? Because I feel like this would be cool just to know people. And so Josh is like an open book and I think that's really good to be. So what he did is he created like a spreadsheet and he's like, everyone put your name in, how many practices you have, how much it's doing in revenue, what your margins. And I think I was one of like the last people to kind of go in. And I know we had just done a startup like 2 years before. And then I just did another startup like 6 months before. And I see like Josh put his numbers in. And then I see like our buddy Chris put his numbers in. And I'm looking, I'm like, oh my God, I feel so inadequate right now. Because that's where your head goes first, right? I think a lot of us think like, oh, I got a brand new startup. Like these guys are crushing it doing like, 2, 3, 400,000 a month in their practices. And I was like, one of our practices just hit 100,000 and the other one just started up and is doing like 30. I was like, I'm going to look like such a loser by putting these numbers in. So like, it's really easy for people to feel that. I definitely put the numbers in. I don't remember if I like upped it by like 10% just to make it like to like a standard threshold of where it was okay. But then we get to the course and for me, I loved it because I definitely was like on the bottom of the totem pole there, right? Like I got to see these people talk about their systems or what they've done. And, I could have taken it two ways. Like at first I did. At first I felt pretty weak, right? You kind of feel like, oh my God, like I'm an imposter. I should not be here. I'm not going to be able to be like these guys. They're way ahead of me. They always are. Or, it's like, all right, can I learn from them? Can I just accept the fact that right now I suck compared to them, right? Like if you just looked at numbers, they are way better than I am. But can I figure out like, okay, can I actually learn something? So I think how you frame things and how you take perspectives on things is super important. So for me, that was a great thing for me to go to. I gained so much additional knowledge from just going to that, being around people who, you want to be like. And for reference, Alex has told me like probably 3 years prior to this to act like you guys. I just never did, right? So I remember coming back and I was like, dude, Josh is doing this way. He does this system. Chris, all these guys are doing it this way. And I was just like, dude, I've been freaking telling you that for 3 years. Like, you need to have like this guy do it. I was like, I don't know. I guess that's just how life works. But no, so that mastermind you had was super helpful for me because it made me, you kind of don't know what you don't know. And when you see people who have done it, and you take the perspective of there's, like you said, there's nothing special. Like, you're a super smart guy. We're all smart people though. Like, there's nothing special. Like, you just have to do it. So yeah, I figured, I don't think I've ever shared that with you, but that was a good mastermind. So thank you.
Good. And my pleasure. And the point, right, with all those numbers is like transparency and humility, right? Like, nobody's better. So like, now, like, this person's really good at this. Right. And so we should learn from this person on this. And this person's really good. Like, the rising tide floats everybody. So
yeah. Awesome. Well, thanks.
Yeah, I know. I've learned so much.
Oh no, this is like a master class for us. This is
I know.
Sweet. We have to
I know.
have you we'll have to
like,
break down. We'll get this episode out, and then we'll have to like break down some of these concepts into like smaller chunks of stuff.
I'm like making notes in my head of like, oh gosh, what do I not know?
You could do like a Joe Rogan episode that's like 4 hours on all this stuff, So
I know.
Yeah. Right.
Yeah. No kidding.
Cool.
No, but I'm ready to write a check to Josh right now and go do your thing.
Yeah.
And make us some money.
Yeah. Well, cool. Thanks for coming on.